It's time to look at another wonderful charging curve, and our contestant today is the Tesla Model 3 Highland long range. Well, all-wheel drive doesn't matter, but the big battery of the Model 3 of the new version. And we're gonna look at a charging session that I filmed at Ionity, but I also filmed a session at a version 3 supercharger, because Ionity is limited to 500 amp and supercharger lets out a bit more amp in the beginning and then slows it down. We're gonna compare the two curves, then we're gonna compare it to other cars. And then we look at the kilowatt hours charge and the range added over time, because that's the most important thing. If you want an overview of your monthly cost for your EV, if you want to see all of your charging sessions, all of your trips, your average consumption on those trips, want to see your AC to DC ratio, then Tronity is exactly your thing. Tronity connects via the app or with the browser to your car. A lot of cars are supported, and you also can have a 100% tax compliant driver's logbook. My viewers get 25% off if they use the link in the description below. So let's look at this beautiful charging session that I filmed off Ionity. And here we are, and like I said, Ionity is limited, or TCS standard, to 500 amp, and this is where we go to. We get 188 kilowatt in the beginning. I plugged in at around 10%, and our peak is now at 16%, 192 kilowatt, and then it already goes down and it goes under the 500 amp limit as well. And we'll see the curve is steadily going down in a really nice way. The voltage is not extremely high. We get right now at 390 volt at 30%. Yeah, there we go. The amps are going down as well. We're still at 33%. We have above 150 kilowatt. We have 23 kilowatt hours charged into the battery in 8 to 9 minutes. We look at the 10 to 80% as well at Ionity and at the supercharger, so you see the difference, even though at the supercharger only charged to from 6 to 75%. We're at 120 kilowatt after 12 minutes at around 44-45%. At 50% state of charge, what do we get? We're not even at 400 volt for a battery, 104 kilowatt, and we go under the 100 kilowatt mark now at 52%. That's a bit early for that. After 16 minutes, we are from 10 to 55%. Not at 400 volt, still 41 kilowatt hours charged after 18 minutes. And then at 20 minutes, where are we? Come on. There we are at 60%, so we charge 50% into the battery after 20 minutes. Almost at 400 volt, our amps are down to 280 kilowatt at 63%. That's a bit low for a almost 75 kilowatt hour battery, as I measured when I did my range tests, which you have to watch, by the way. And then where do we have a charge to 90%, I think. We're not gonna wait for the whole thing. I'm gonna go a bit forward here. At 70%, we have 73 kilowatt and it took 26 minutes, but we go to 80%. We're gonna wanna see that, because 80% is a big thing. And the difference from 80 to 90%, it slowly goes down more and more with the charging power, which is okay. And after 30 minutes, we're still not at 80%. So at Ionity, from 10 to 80%, battery was preheated, by the way, it was warm. Everything was, if it preheated the battery during the charging, I don't know. There was no heat on, no AC, anything while I was doing the charging session. Now we are at 80% after 34 minutes, and we're gonna look at the Ionity, the supercharger, where we will see it's not that much different. And 40 kilowatt at around 82%. I'm gonna stop now. And it's just, like I said, it will slowly go down and more to 90%, where it will be around 36 kilowatt and then 32. And here we have the two charging curves that I filmed. The blue one is Ionity and the red one is the supercharger version 3. Battery again was preheated when I arrived. It was pretty warm on that day. Cooling did a lot. I got a peak of 200, and this is also very complicated, because Ionity superchargers, you cannot see what the charger is giving you. You see what goes into the battery in the car, and the car showed 239 kilowatt as a peak. And I have seen at Ionity and I can just guess. In Ionity, it said, I don't know, 180 kilowatt at the charger and 178 kilowatts, so 2 kilowatt less in the car. So I added 2 kilowatt of all the numbers that I have seen on the screen of the Model 3. This is an estimate. I don't know if it's more or less. I have no idea. Again, there is no screen on the supercharger. This is just added, so a charging loss and 2 kilowatt. I think that's okay. So I added this for the charging power that we have, and then I get a peak of 241 kilowatt right in the beginning, and it goes up pretty fast. But then it goes down and under the 200 kilowatt at 20% already. And you might say, yeah, this then is the 500 amp limit and should be exactly the same at Ionity. But no, you see that it stays above a tiny bit. I mean, we are here at 190 and here at 173. It's still 17 kilowatt, and we touch here at around 38%. So I plugged in at 6%, like I said, and at Ionity at 10%, even at 14. No, 10%. But at 14%. No, I did not. 10% I plugged in. Yeah, fine. Got 180 kilowatt. So supercharger is better on the bottom, and then you get a little dip where the supercharger is a bit lower charging power, and I guess it's because so much power in the beginning it had to cool more, and the BMS says, let's give it a rest. And then here at the end, I think that's weather, temperature outside, cooling. I mean, the curve looks almost identical here, from 53, so 52, 53% up to almost 80%. It's almost the same curve here at the end. 75. It goes a bit higher on the Ionity on the supercharger. But again, we can see at 2 minutes I was at 11% at the supercharger, and I was at 31 minutes at 75%. So it was 29 minutes from 11 to 75%. And when I look at the Ionity charge, from 75 to 80% took 4 minutes. Let's say I take those 4 minutes, then I get to 33 minutes, but I was at 11%, so I still say, because the charging power is a bit more here in the end, it's still 33 minutes. So it's 1 minute or maybe 1.5, 2 minutes faster from 10 to 80% at a supercharger. That's not a reason to go to a supercharger. The price is way more important. And of course, for a Tesla driver, the convenience. You just plug in, no card or anything. And many chargers, and they work. Supercharger network is just amazing. I charged this car also on a version 2 supercharger, and then yes, we only got 140 kilowatt, but I kept it for a very long time. But this is the charging curve, and as you can see, it's a nice curve, but it goes down pretty fast. But now it gets interesting. I'm gonna compare the Model 3 supercharger curve, which is in here in blue, to the Volkswagen ID.7, my private car Pro, which was recorded in the winter, but I had, of course, preheated the battery, so it should be the same as in summer, because cooling of, I have not seen any problems with cooling of a battery in an electric car in a long time. So cooling is done for the battery for high power charging really well, and even in the Kia EV6, Ioniq 6, Ioniq 5 and so on, even EV9, 800 volt system where they put a lot of power in, cooling is just fine, even in Porsche Taycan and something like this, which I've never tested, by the way. Okay, Porsche? Just saying. And I have the ID.4 GTX in here on purpose because it's a bit of a different curve than the ID.7. But because it's an SUV, it has way higher consumption. We need this to see when we look at the range added in time. And then in red in here I have the Ioniq 6. This is actually a curve of a Kia EV6, because when I had the Ioniq 6 it was winter time and I didn't preheat the battery for the charging session, and I didn't have time to do a full charging session with the car. But I know it's exactly the same battery as the EV6, Ioniq 5, EV9 and so on. And it's an amazing charging curve because it's an 800 volt system. I don't have Porsche Taycan, Porsche Macan, Audi Q6, so all the 800 volt system, the other cars in here, because I could never test them. I never got them. Audi doesn't give me those cars, and Porsche as well. But as we can see in here, the Model 3 starts amazingly well. Here in the bottom is faster than all other cars. Then it goes under the Ioniq 6 but stays above the other two, and then from 19% on it's underneath the ID7 for the whole time. At 22% it's underneath all the other cars in here, because the power goes just down very, very fast. And as you can see on this graph, it's underneath the 100 kilowatt before all of the other cars. ID7 is a 64%, ID4 GTX even higher, 67%, and the Ioniq 6, hello, look at this curve, it's amazing, goes under 100 kilowatt here at 85% or something. Here we have the kilowatt hours charged over time, and here I also have the times. The EV6 takes, so this charging curve was the EV6, like I said, it's with the other cars. It took, in my test, 19 minutes from 10 to 80%. Famously, Hyundai and Kia say it should be done in 18 minutes in perfect conditions. My ID7 in the winter took 25.5 minutes. The GTX took 31 minutes, and the Model 3, like we talked before, 33 minutes. So from 10 to 80% is not amazing. But like I said, it's all about the range. How much range do you need to get to the next charger? You want to arrive with a low state of charge, you have good charging power, but you need the range added into the car fast, so you need low consumption. Of course, Model 3 is amazingly low consumption. But the kilowatt hours, again, we have the same picture because of the charging curves we've seen. Model 3 is the lowest. GTX is low as well, but meets the ID7 at around 30 minutes, so that's above 80%. For the ID7, and the Ioniq 6 is just above everything because the amazing charging curve. Finally, here we have the range added over time, so 10, 20, 30 minutes, how much range do you add? I took my average consumption that I have with my ID7 last week, 2 weeks ago, in the summer, with 174 watt hours per kilometer at an average speed of 126 kilometers an hour. I did my 130 kilometers an hour range test. The Model 3, I had 190 watt hours per kilometer consumption, but I think I drove the Model 3 against the ID7, and they're very, very similar. I think on that day the consumption was just higher because I needed a bit of heat, and in the ID7 I didn't need heat or AC, it was perfect condition. So I really think I even give the Model 3 a tiny bit lower consumption because I'm nice. The same for the Ioniq 6. I drove the ID7 against the Ioniq 6, but I think the Ioniq 6 on that day had a bit of a colder battery and therefore a bit of a higher consumption. I think that the Ioniq 6 is a tiny bit more efficient than my ID7. That's why I also give it 173. And the ID4 GTX I measured at 230 watt hours per kilometer, but again, it wasn't the perfect weather, so I give it 220 watt hours per kilometer. And then we have the range added here. You see the curve. GTX, the SUV, has the lowest range added over time. Then the Model 3, because ID7, Model 3, Ioniq 6 are all three very efficient, but when it comes to the charging curve, Model 3 is in this group not the best. Then comes my ID7 and the Ioniq 6. Look at that. I mean, when we look at the time, after 10 minutes, I have added 166 kilometers of range in my ID7, 150 in the Model 3, 122 in the GTX, but 203 kilometers in the Ioniq 6. And this is this difference. Amazing. I mean, 200 kilometers, let's say this is the time where you can leave and go to the next charger, because you don't arrive with 0. Let's say you arrive with 40 kilometers and then you have 240 kilometers to get to the next charger, and before you already drove to 130, so your consumption doesn't change unless you go uphill or something. So 200 kilometers of range in the ID7 takes 12.5 minutes. In the Model 3, around 15 minutes or 2.5 minutes more. Is this a big deal? I don't think so. In the GTX, it takes around 18-19 minutes. Yeah, that's 7 minutes more. When you have to charge a few times, that's a bit more than. But the Ionity 6 was just 10 minutes. You charge for 10 minutes and you can go to the next charger. It's just amazing. Ionity 6 rules, the 800 volt system. It's an amazing charging curve. And with the new preheating in the winter, it's just awesome. So as we can see, these 4 cars have similar sized batteries, 75 to 77 kilowatt hours. And the Model 3 is amazingly efficient and charges okay, but not amazing anymore. Whereas Tesla was back in the day, oh my god, this is an amazing charging car. It's still great, don't get me wrong, it's still great. It's better than older cars or smaller battery cars. It's still awesome. It's not a big deal, and like I said, it's 2 minutes when you charge 200 kilometers in the car, so that's really fine. But it's not extraordinary. Even at a supercharger version 3, I don't think that at version 4 will be any different. If you want to follow me on Instagram, BatteryLife1, and if you want to support the channel, there's a Patreon link in the description below. And here on YouTube, you can also support the channel via channel membership. But that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day and take care. Bye.